Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Hennessy from the Geography Department here in Trinity, and I'm also involved in the Irish Studies programme. And as you can see here, we call it Irish Studies, an interdisciplinary course in Irish civilization. And interdisciplinary means that what we try to do is to break out of the what might be seen as the boxes that we normally do studies in, which will be English or Irish or geography or history. And we try to present a course that breaks those boundaries and brings different disciplines together into a course that studies Irish civilization, Irish culture, Irish identity. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't take the discipline seriously. We think that history has a role, literary studies have a role, geography has a role, other disciplines have a role. Good interdisciplinary work relies on respecting the different traditions, the different methods, the different conclusions of various disciplines. So what we try to do is take the best from a range of disciplines and focus on a study of Irish culture, Irish civilization, Irish identity. The four main elements of it are English, Irish, history, and then an interdisciplinary component. So all Irish Studies students take some combination of those. The interdisciplinary component is really central to what we're trying to do in the degree. So all the other bits are, of course, important, but then we have this interdisciplinary component which we call Imagining Ireland. So in each year, there is a 10-unit module called Imagining Ireland. And what we're trying to do there is to look at different ways in which Ireland has been experienced, Ireland has been represented, the way in which representations and perceptions of Irishness have changed over time. And what we do there is I coordinate those modules, and in each year I bring in people from history, from English, from Irish, but also from genetics, from film studies, from the history of art, from geography, from sociology, from politics. We bring in just about any discipline that's relevant to the study of Ireland, and we bring those together in the Imagining Ireland component. And so, for example, in first year, we do themes such as the people of Ireland, the landscape of Ireland, the languages of Ireland. And we bring in different disciplines. So in the People of Ireland section, we have archaeology, we have genetics, we have geography, we have history, and we use all of the perspective and the knowledge from those different disciplines to look at who are the Irish people and how are they made up and how can we study them. So in this way, we don't see this in any way as a 3-subject moderatorship or a 4-subject moderatorship. We very strongly see it as an interdisciplinary course, an interdisciplinary program. Another important thing to say about that is that as an interdisciplinary program focused on Ireland, so obviously all the way through the course there is a focus on Ireland. We're trying to get at what makes up Irish identity, what makes up Irish culture, and how has that changed over time. And all of us, to a greater or lesser extent, who are involved in the Irish Studies programme, do this in our own research. So I have two main research areas. I suppose the most important one is medieval Ireland. I study 13th century Ireland in the main as an historical geographer. But in order to understand the geography of 13th century Ireland, the human geography of 13th century Ireland, I need to do the sorts of things that geographers traditionally do, which is settlement patterns, agriculture, landscape, land use. But I also bring in architecture. I look at the literature of the period. I look at what how the environment is changing from a scientific point of view. And I bring together a whole range of disciplines, legal studies, a whole range of disciplines to try and do my historical geography. And it's the same for some historians and some people doing literary studies. We try to bring these interdisciplinary things together. So we do that with a focus on Ireland. However, it's not just Ireland, 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 Ireland. So you're not just in some sort of parochial ghetto looking at Ireland and only dealing with Irish material. Because the other thing we do all the way through the course, in most modules, and we stress in the Imagining Ireland modules, are comparative frameworks. So we set everything within a set of comparative frameworks. So we look at Ireland and Britain, which I think is absolutely essential. You can't study Ireland in any period, really. In prehistory, in early history, in the medieval period, the early modern period, or the modern period, without understanding Ireland in the context of Ireland and Britain. In the context of what a colleague of mine calls the Northwest European archipelago, rather than calling it the British Isles. So you have to see it within that context. So almost everything that happens in Ireland, right back into prehistory, is influenced by things that were happening in Britain. And the further we go on in the historical record, the more important that becomes. So that's one context we always take into account. A second framework is the European framework. So I don't think it's possible to understand Irish culture and civilization without understanding developments on a European scale. So with our second year Imagining Ireland students, in the last 3 weeks, I was looking at the writing of history in 17th century Ireland. So new ways of writing about the history of Ireland in the 17th century. And in order to do that, you have to understand the Counter-Reformation in Europe. You have to understand the development of Catholic universities in the 17th century within the framework of the Counter-Reformation. You have to understand the diaspora of the Irish in Spain and France and elsewhere in 17th century Europe. And in almost every period, there is a European framework to what we're doing. In first year, with the Imagining Ireland students, I do a thing on prehistory. And you can't understand Ireland in the Neolithic without understanding it in a European framework. So we do that. Also critical for Ireland is an Atlantic framework. So the other great comparative framework is an Atlantic one. So as soon as we move into the 16th and the 17th centuries, what happens in Ireland is hugely influenced by what happens across the Atlantic and in England's developing Atlantic capitalist economy and developing Atlantic culture. And then finally, of course, we take a global perspective at various times. Where does Ireland fit in a globalizing world? And when I say a globalizing world, Ireland was globalizing in the 16th century. It was globalizing in the 17th century. Globalization is not something that started in the 1980s or the 1990s. There's globalization going right back into the early modern period. So at all times, we set Ireland within that framework. And you also take specific modules that are nothing to do with Ireland. So we do British history, we do American history, we do European history. You get modules like that as well. The second set of frameworks then that we have that is not just to do with Ireland are what I'd call theoretical frameworks. So we have courses, theoretical and methodological frameworks. So we have courses on the genre of the novel. We have courses on modernity and literature. The courses that are to do with much more generic elements of studying culture and civilization. Methodologically, we have courses on doing history, for example. All the first years do a course on doing history, which is how to understand historic sources, how to reference material, how to practice history. So the Irish material, which is obviously the core of what we do, is always set within those comparative and theoretical frameworks. Now, to a certain extent, we beefed this up a couple of years ago because we had applied to the Teaching Council of Ireland to have the Irish Studies degree accredited for secondary school teaching in Ireland. And that's quite a laborious process. And one of the things they came back to us and said was, well, there's just too much on Ireland here, that in order for us to accredit this, and we were sort of saying, well, it's an Irish Studies program. But then we started thinking about it, and we looked at our program, and we said, actually, they're probably right. There probably is too much Irish material in here. And we said, because they asked us to do it, but then when we got to the end of that process, we said, this is much better. So we have this material in here, and it's much better. Which also means that we are now accredited. So if you do an Irish Studies degree, you will be accredited, can be accredited as a teacher in history or Irish or English, depending on how you go through the degree, depending on the path that you take through the degree. You can be accredited in all three of those subjects. Another important point about the degree is that when we started it off, we had compulsory Irish. So we all thought, most of us in the program are Irish speakers, and we thought it was a very important part of it to have compulsory Irish language. What we found over the first few years was that the range of ability in Irish was too great, that we couldn't cope with teaching that. And that some people were coming in with excellent Irish, other people were coming in with next to no Irish, and we had everything in between. We thought we'd get just advanced people and people with no Irish. And we got everything. And it wasn't really possible to satisfactorily teach that. So what we decided upon was to create two ways of doing the Irish Studies degree. So we have a strand A and a strand B. And in strand A, you don't have to do Irish language. You still hear about Irish literature, but you get the modules through English. And you can do the whole Irish Studies degree program without having to study the Irish language. We still strongly encourage anybody who does that strand to become involved with the Common Gaelic, to go to the Gaeltacht, to take Irish language classes which are provided free here in Trinity. So we definitely encourage people to engage with the Irish language, but it's not a compulsory part of the program. And the second strand is strand B, where you do compulsory Irish language, and you do that all the way through the degree. So it's the same degree with a slightly different slant. Another development that we're trying to build up at the moment is study abroad. So most of the Irish universities now have highly developed Erasmus programs and other study abroad programs. In Irish studies, we have a real difficulty, because if we're sending somebody away for a year of their study, where do they go? So if you're studying geography, well, pick your universities. You can go wherever you want, and you'll be able to get the modules to equate to what we would do here. But in Irish studies, how do we do that? And what we've been doing, we've been working hard to build up a series of partnerships or relationships with other universities where we can send a student abroad for a year, and they will get enough material to still be doing an Irish studies program. So we have a relationship with the University of Liverpool, which has the biggest and the best Irish studies program in the UK. And that is a very fruitful relationship. We also have and are building up a relationship with Boston College, obviously in Boston. And Boston College have a very good Irish studies program. And we have a student there at the moment, and she's spending a whole year in Boston and is getting on famously out there. And we hope to develop that over the years. We're also developing relationships with Fordham in the Bronx in New York, and we think that will bear fruit now. So what we're going to do is we're going to be in a position now to encourage students, and I certainly for my part as the Imagining Ireland coordinator within the degree will be strongly encouraging students to take a year away and to go to America or to go to Liverpool and do the third year of their Irish Studies program in a university abroad. We will also be looking at Notre Dame, have a very big Irish Studies program. We'll be looking at that as well. So I hope that as we develop in the coming years, that a study abroad year for some students will become really a regular part of our program, just as it is for many students in all the other degree programs in college. So what we have then is a program that goes through 4 years of an honours degree, where you do your English, your Irish, your history, and your Imagining Ireland program. And we think that this builds up then into a really very thorough grounding in Irish culture, identity, and civilization. We also hope that by the end of this program, you will have developed generic skills in the study of culture and civilization and identity. So that we would hope that a student who finished our Irish Studies degree would be able to go off and do, say, postgraduate programs elsewhere that wouldn't necessarily be about Ireland at all. That they would be able to take the generic learning that they acquired in Irish Studies and apply that to interdisciplinary studies of France or America or any other place. We would definitely regard that as an objective of our program. We're 5, coming up to 6 years into the program now, so it's relatively new. We've been developing it and tweaking it over those years. And one thing we can say is that we are really quite gratified by where our graduates are going. So we have graduates now who have worked in museums. We have graduates who are taking postgraduate programs elsewhere. Many students nowadays go on to do master's degrees. So we've had students accepted into Oxford, accepted into St Andrews, into Edinburgh. We have a student doing a master's degree in museum studies in Leicester. So I think the interdisciplinary nature of the degree that we do here is attractive to people who are recruiting students into some of the top master's programs in the UK. We have some who've stayed here as well. We've one student just finished a master's degree in women's studies here in Trinity. Some of them are in employment. One of them is a professional comedian. I don't know what that says about us, but she's appeared on RTE. She was one of our quieter students. She hardly said a word. It was difficult to get a word out of her in class. And then she appears on television doing stand-up. So it was quite strange. So obviously the formality of standing up and talking is quite different to informal contribution to class. So I think really the Irish Studies program is holding up in terms of where our students are being accepted into postgraduate programs. So that's just a brief outline of what we do and how we see the degree will prepare you. We essentially see it as an arts humanities degree, a standard sort of arts humanities degree with a focus on Ireland. So it's not just Ireland, it has these other elements to it as well. Okay, I'll take questions now.
How does the coursework go? Do they write essays in the first term, and how many essays, or do they just do exams at the end of the terms?
We have a big mix of work and assessment. So we have exams at the end of the year, not at the end of the term. Trinity semesterized but didn't semesterize. So we have semesters, but all the exams are sat at the end of the year. We have essays through the year. So they will write essays. Some of those essays are very short. Some of them are much longer. So they'll have 2,000 word essays, but we also get them to write much smarter 1,000 word pieces in order to get people into the process of academic writing. We have other elements where they will do little portfolios of material. So they might have to comment on a source, do a bibliography, and then we also assess on oral presentations. In each year, the Imagining Ireland component contains oral presentations. So that you have to stand up, do a little PowerPoint, and make a 5 or 10 minute presentation. And I regard that as a very important, essentially I think an arts humanities degree, what we're looking at is that you should come out of a degree like this being able to take in information, think about it, form judgments about it, and then articulate those judgments in writing and in speaking. And that's what we're hoping to produce. And the Irish stuff is another element of it. I regard that's the same for the geography degree. I regard that the same for a history degree. That is in the end what you come out with an arts humanities degree. So that if you go into banking or if you go into PR or and our students go into almost anything, that you have that ability to take in information, assess it, form judgments, and articulate those judgments in writing and in speech. And that's what you get from an arts humanities degree. And I think in the main, that's what employers are looking for as well.
Like how many would you do in the term? How many essays? Because they sort of, in the first term, they have fairly similar.
They do quite a lot. They would do at least, in a year, they'd probably present at least 10 pieces of work of varying lengths.
Sorry, are the essays done if you're doing the Irish strand, or the essays done in Irish in the presentations, or the Irish language?
If you're doing the Irish language courses, they have written material in Irish.
Yeah. So if you're doing strand, whatever.
No, but the only sort of assessments that you'll have in Irish, if you're doing the strand B, which is the Irish strand, are the bits to do with the Irish language. Otherwise, you're just in with all the other Irish study students. So the way it works there is the Irish language bits are separate modules within the program. So both sets of students do mostly the same material. It's just that those who are doing Strand B don't do some modules that the Strand A's do, and they do Irish language modules instead.
Sorry, just to clarify, the essays that they do, are they done in the Irish language?
Only for the Irish language modules. For the other modules, they'll submit in English as with the rest of the students.
How many contact hours would there be every week, and what would there be a large reading? How big would the reading load be, and is there much kind of, in terms of archaeology or anything, would there be kind of field expeditions or anything like that?
On average, I'd say about 10 hours a week. But I wouldn't mind that too much. I wouldn't pay very much attention to that at all, to tell you the truth, because for arts students, arts humanities students, you have to think of the totality of what you're doing. And all modules are weighted according to student input, not in terms of how many hours are you in the class. So a 5-unit module is 125 hours of student input. That can be lectures, that can be seminars, that can be library time, that can be writing time. It's a whole range of things. And there's a huge variability between modules as to how that 125 hours will be made up. We do field work. We do field trips at least. We don't do too much actually hands-on work in the field, but we certainly do go out into the field. I'm a geographer, so I always think of field courses as part of what we do. So we will do some elements of that as well. Depends on the path that you take. So if you do Strand A, for example, you're not going to get accredited in Irish. So it depends on the modules you take. So as you move through, particularly into 3rd year and fourth year, you start getting choices. So we offer options. And if you choose not to do options in Irish, well, you're not going to get accredited in Irish. If you choose not to take options in English literature, you won't get accredited for the English one. So it depends on the modules that you choose in the 3rd and the 4th year, which of those 3 subjects you can get accredited for. No, it wouldn't be possible. The way you have to make choices wouldn't allow that to be possible.
Could you be accredited for 2?
Yes, you would be for 2. No matter what you do, you'd be accredited for 2 of them. So
Going forward to a HDIP, supposing you were thinking of teaching, like how does it lead itself out to that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Actually, we think that for the HDIP, if you're applying for the HDIP, it's very competitive in hearsay to get in. And the Irish Studies degree looks really good to them because in a classroom context, having somebody with an interdisciplinary background is actually a real advantage. So somebody who isn't just completely pigeonholed into one of the standard disciplines.
But to do Strand B like I do it in Irish, is there a very high level? Would you have to have a very high standard of Irish?
You have to have a reasonable standard of Irish. You want to be talking about a C in Honours Irish, say, or something towards that level, that sort of level. But they would assess you. They would tell you whether or not you're going to be able for it. So the Irish department, so the strands happen after you, we ask for you to express a preference, but the strands actually happen after you come in. So the CAO code for Irish Studies is just Irish Studies. And we do ask for a preference, there's a form, and we do ask for a preference, but they aren't 2 separate codes. So what happens is you come in, you say you want to do Strand B, and the Irish department will have a chat with you, they will look at your Irish, and they will tell you whether or not you're going to be able to cope with the level of Irish that you need to do the Strand B.
And that's from the first year, yeah?
Yeah, from the very beginning.
So if they consider that you weren't, then you have no choice but to do Strand A?
Yeah, effectively. There wouldn't be any point, if your Irish wasn't up to doing it, there wouldn't be any point. You'd just be, but if you had reasonable Irish, I mean, they would be flexible. They're open. They like people doing the Strand B. So, they're open to it. And they would say, look, you probably could have a go off this, but you'll need to do some crash courses or, make a particular effort to develop it.
Would they help you along by teaching you Irish as well?
They would certainly tell you where to go to get up to the level that you'd need, yeah. But their problem was, in the early days, was that they couldn't cope with all of that. So if somebody really didn't, if their Irish was weak, they couldn't actually cope with dealing with those and the people who had good Irish as well. But remember, even if you do Strand A, most of us are Irish speakers within the programme, and our current director isn't, but he's American, so he gets a pass on this, and we're going to put him under pressure. But you know, we will encourage you to develop your Irish language anyway, as a sort of a co-curricular or extracurricular thing. We would encourage people to do that anyway.
And would focus on the Irish be more oral or written?
It's both. It's both.
What would be more
Oh, it'll be more written. I mean, university level stuff is always writing is the key thing, which is always much more difficult.
Would you end up being fluent by the end of the course, or does it really depend on the person?
If you did the Strand B, you would, absolutely. Before we had the Strands, we had a student who came in from Belfast, and she'd done A-levels, and she had hardly any Irish, because she didn't do Irish for A-levels, and she ended up completely fluent. She wrote her dissertation, which is, a 10, 12,000 word piece of work in Irish, and it was published in an Irish journal an Irish magazine called Core. And so, yes, you would be fluent by the end of it. You go to Gaeltacht, you would end up being a fluent Irish speaker by the end of it, absolutely.
Would the course content in the Strand B, like the Irish, would that be similar to the Irish in the TSN?
Yeah, most of the time you would be in with their modern Irish students.
Okay.
Most of the time. They have some separate Irish studies, Irish components, but most of the time, yes, you would be in with the modern Irish students. And you also do some of the hard, scary, early Irish stuff as well, which is not for the faint-hearted, but good for the soul. Anything else? The other thing just to say is you can pick up a brochure from us, but we are also, our director, Brian Cliff, very cleverly got the domain irishstudies.com. So if you go to irishstudies.com, you come straight to us in Trinity. So if you need further information, you can look us up on the web. We have quite a lot on the web. We have quite a lot of detail about the courses and the programme. And also, you can get undergraduate handbooks and things like that off the web. And also, you could just contact us. There are 2 contact emails on the brochure. Get in touch with us if you want further information or you want to talk about it, and we will get back on to you. Okay? Thank you all.